Lynndon, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much for having me on board.
Yeah, I'm super stoked about this. So first of all, I'm going to tell everybody how we met. So I'm the daughter of a former mechanic. He is a bower. He trained me how to fish before I could walk. So I grew up, in a kind of blue collar, trades oriented family in terms of my father. Um, since then, I've taken a huge interest I've been working in technology for 25 years, and I decided, wouldn't it be cool if it was easier to buy stuff from Canadian artisans? So I started joining all these Facebook groups, and one of the groups that I joined is the Canadian Blacksmiths and Bladesmiths group. And I started talking with you guys there, and what was very interesting is that you guys are so nice. I was shocked to see how much of these dudes I really got along with and welcomed me into part of the group. So you are a blacksmith.
That's right. Yeah, and I guess the nice thing is just the Canadian thing, as far as I see it. That's just Canada for you. But
Yeah, and let's tell everybody where you're at. You're out in Manitoba, right?
yeah, I'm in Winnipeg, Manitoba right now. I've been in Winnipeg for the last 20 years now. I'm born and raised in Flin Flon, Manitoba, which is about 9-hour drive north of here. Small mining community where we gold mine and mine for copper as well. And yeah, I kind of grew up there with the whole community, working around metal my whole life, and then I moved to Winnipeg for computers and technology, actually.
So we're kind of in the same worlds then. I mean, in a way.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting the take here you've got on things right now. And you mentioned to me how you're looking into the world of trades now with where life is taking you, and I wish I would have gone down that road right out of high school. I don't know why I didn't. I think the almighty dollar kind of spoke to me more than my heart. And I went into computer programming thinking that was going to be the almighty thing for me that was going to set the world on fire for me. And a few months into it, I was like, nope, not what I want to do at all. And it was a few years later, I was working for an insurance company. Actually, we did repairs on houses that had floods or fires in them. And the gentleman that I was working with told me he had gone to school for welding, and he was kind of working at this place as a favor for his friend because his friend owned the company. And me and him were working together for almost a year, and then he finally convinced me to try going into school for welding. So I applied for school for welding, and I don't look back on it for 2 seconds. And it's one of the smartest decisions I've ever made in my life. I love every minute of being in the shop and being behind a welder and everything that I've learned that goes along with it. The person that I've grown into versus the person that I used to be, I couldn't be prouder.
So I'm just curious, how old are you now?
I'm 39 now. I actually
You're 39.
I just had my 39th birthday a couple weeks ago.
Oh, happy birthday.
Thank you.
And how old were you when you actually decided to leave tech and go into welding?
Would have been 20.
Okay, so you weren't actually that old then.
No.
Because that's what's curious is that and it's funny that you say that because I ended up going to like university like 7 times and dropping out, and finally I went into tech because that was like the 90s when things were still hot. The salaries, like you said, people were like getting bonuses like crazy. So it just made sense. And my whole adult life, I was like, man, I should be like a welder or a carpenter or something, just kept calling me. And eventually, I ended up with like a disability like 2 years ago, lost the ability to walk. And now I'm like, oh man, it's too late. Because in a way, I'm like, I don't think I can do this anymore. The point being is that you were able to finally do the thing that you love, right?
You could say that, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's other things in life that I could love more than being behind a mask all day long laying beads, like maybe laying on a beach all day long sipping margaritas, but
Sure.
doesn't pay
But
the bills.
it's a lot of physical work though, I guess is what I'm getting at, is that it's a trade, it's a career choice that unlike coding at a computer where you can do no matter whether or not you can walk or whatever, it's something that's physical. Like this is gonna, I've seen what it's done to my dad's hands, for example.
Yeah, I mean, well, there's so many different facets with welding, with metalworking. I mean, I consider jewelry, it's a part of metalworking. I consider putting up a skyscraper part of metalworking. They're in the same field. Um, you're playing with metal. What a jeweler does is obviously a lot more intricate, but you're playing with metal. You have to understand metal, and what a jeweler does, in my eyes, is absolutely mind-boggling. And what ironworkers do when they're erecting 100-story size skyscrapers is absolutely mind-boggling to me. And then there's so much in between. The guys on the oil patches, the guys in fab shops. That's where I was for the majority of my life. I was a guy in a fab shop, and now for the last 12 years, I've been in research and development, working for New Flyer bus manufacturing, and that has been kind of an eye opener to industry for me, because I haven't been just a welder for them. I've been doing you name it, anything that you could think of when it comes to bus manufacturing, I've been involved in now pretty much for the last 12 years. And um, there's so many different things you can get into when it comes to trades, working with your hands. The guys that I see that are working in the manufacturing plant, there's about 800 different people working in there. And you go from guys that are crawling all over all day long on their hands and knees, up on ladders, doing structural work, down to guys that are they're at a bench all day long because they're assembling smaller parts, and they get to sit in a booth all day long and run a TIG welder. And you talk to a lot of welders, and the TIG welding booth is where it's at.
So everybody wants to get on that bench then.
Yeah, it's the gravy train.
So if you were, I mean, obviously didn't end up studying the trades. It's something I want to kind of pick up as a hobby later on. I want to do like woodworking. I want to start wood carving and who knows what else. But when you're studying something like welding, how like do they teach you all the different roles, or do they really just kind of form you in the basics of welding and then you really kind of decide what you want to do after?
Well, see, for me, I think I got pretty lucky with what I fell into. At the time of my life that I went into school, things were a little bit haywire for me, and I was able to take the evening course at a local community college. There was there was a few different options for me for welding in Winnipeg here, but the two main ones that stuck out were Red River College, which was actually a 2-year course, or I could go to a school formerly known as Winnipeg South Tech, which is now called Manitoba Institution of Technology. And I went to Winnipeg South Tech in their evening course, which was a 10-month program that focused on all aspects of welding and gave you your first level apprenticeship. The Red River College program did the same thing. It focused on all levels of welding, and you walked out of there with your first level apprenticeship, but it was a 2-year program. Speaking to different people, I came to the conclusion that the 1-year program would give me essentially the same thing the 2-year program would do. Why go for 2 years when you can do it in 1 year?
Yeah.
Looking back, I wish I would have done the 2-year program instead, because there's so much to learn. It is crazy. And if you can take the time to learn, take the time to learn. I had the time when I was that age. I could have taken 5 years if I wanted to have been in school. And I really, really wish I would have, because I'm 39 years old now. I've got a 5-year-old daughter. She's almost 5-year-old daughter at home, wife that runs her own business, and things are hectic here, man. For me to leave my day job to try to go and go back to school, not happening right now. So A-
Interesting.
and I'm trying to run my own side business on top of all that, right? Like I've got my full-time day job, and I've also got the Abstract Blacksmith as my side project that I run evenings and weekends. And yeah, running on 4 hours of sleep here and there pretty much most of the time.
Yeah, I bet. Let's talk about that stuff. The Abstract Blacksmith on Instagram. People can follow you at abstract_blacksmith. So I'm curious for blacksmithing. I have a bunch of stupid questions for you. So let's get down to the basics here. First of all, do you need a welding background to do blacksmithing, or is that completely separate?
Hell no, definitely not. I mean, it helps a lot, helps a ton, but I you can walk into blacksmithing not knowing a thing. You don't need to.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you don't need to have any basic skills. You don't even need to be handy.
No, no. In fact, there's a part of me that feels you're better off walking into it empty-handed almost, not having preconceived ideas.
Okay. See, the only preconceived ideas that I have about blacksmithing is from video games. So maybe I have a very, unrealistic impression of what blacksmiths do. But I have the picture of like the big dude with like the leather apron, like hammering on top of an anvil, a red hot piece of metal. Is that pretty accurate?
For the most part, that's what a blacksmith does. I mean, it doesn't have to be a big dude. I've seen one of my most favorite blacksmiths that I follow. Oh my goodness, her name is slipping my mind now. I want to say her name is Anne. No, Katie. Her name is Katie, and she's out of the UK. What an amazing artist. This girl can put out the most beautiful artwork I've ever seen in my life. And she is, from what I can see in her pictures, she is a tiny little framed girl, man. Tiny. And she's putting out work that I'm envious of, to say the
I'm
least.
gonna have to check that out then.
Yeah, KV art.
Because what's her
Sorry,
name? Sorry,
KV artist blacksmith.
KV.
That's right.
KV artist. Okay, let me write that down here. Because do you have to be like strong? I guess. I mean, I've heard you have to like be strong enough for the hammer. No.
Um, Depends. It really depends. I mean, it depends what you want to be making, right? I want to build myself a big arbor for my front yard. That's requiring me to work with a bunch of 1 inch round bar, which in the lengths that I'm working it on, it requires a fair amount of strength. I mean, it's not like I would say if you're doing industrial welding, you have to be a strong guy. If you want to do industrial blacksmithing, you got to be a strong guy. There's, like I said, there's different facets to all of it. You go into the industrial side of things, yeah, you got to be a big dude or a big girl. Either there's girls out there that can swing sledgehammers like you wouldn't believe, man. Holy moly! But yeah, you want to go into the artist side of things. There's definitely a huge open door to people of all ages, all sizes. There is a gentleman. GL Tongs, I think is his name, I want to say. He's working out of Indonesia, I think. He literally is sitting on his deck. He's got a little tiny forge and he sits all day long. That's how he blacksmiths. He sits all day long and he barely moves. His forge is right there. His anvil's right in front of him. And he makes, GS Tongs. That's the guy, GS Tongs. He's another amazing blacksmith that he actually was one of the first guys I ever started following because he has excellent videos on YouTube explaining how to get into the first kind of steps of what you want to be building, like your tongs, your punches, and stuff like that when it comes into blacksmithing.
So you build your own tools?
Uh, I have built almost everything you can see behind me, right in the shop here.
Yeah, yeah.
So I have built almost everything. This big metal frame thing, that's my press behind me. You can probably see down there is my tong rack. Almost all of those tongs on that rack were built by me. This anvil was a nice big 400-pound anvil. I built the stand for that, and a lot of the tools that are around that I've built as well.
It's really, really interesting, guys. For people who are listening, what's interesting is that because this podcast is audio only, but what's cool is that Lando is actually joining me directly from his shop, so I can actually see all the cool stuff in the background. And I mean, the anvil he just pointed at is gigantic.
408 pounds. I've had some bigger ones in the shop, and I've seen even larger than what I've ever had. It's a mediocre size anvil, to say the least, compared
Okay,
to
mediocre for you.
yeah.
But so you made the anvil?
No, the anvil I didn't make the anvil itself. The anvil itself is a Peterite anvil from England, made in England. But I had to custom make the stand for it and a lot of the tooling that goes for it. There's a lot of tools that go with it that look like hammers that aren't hammers. They're called top tools, and they're actually meant to hold on top of a hot piece that hammer looking tool is then actually struck with another hammer, and that way it indents its impression, whatever shape that impression might be, whether it's a round of a certain size or a triangle of a certain size, will help imprint that impression onto the hot steel. So
Cool.
a prime example of one of those tools would be to have a corresponding bottom tool with it. That's called your swage tool. Say, for example, I'm working on 2-inch round bar and I want to retain that 2-inch round. I've lost that shape for whatever reason through my forging. I would use a 2-inch round bottom swage, a 2-inch top tool as well, cup the hot piece of steel between those two, and then either use the appropriate device in my shop, like my press or a power hammer, or I would have a gentleman along with me, or it could be a lady as well that does the striking for it. I haven't had the opportunity to work with any females in my shop, unfortunately. The door is wide open if there's anybody that ever wants to learn. I push through people through here like crazy. I'm always bringing in new people to learn. So
Well, I gotta say, if we were in the same city, I think I'd definitely take you up on that offer.
I would
But
love to.
it's interesting because none of what you said really made sense to me, and I say that only because there are so many weird names, right? I mean, I don't know any of these tools. How? So first of all, how did you learn? Did you learn blacksmithing specifically from like a course, or did you learn from like YouTube videos?
Um, okay, my blacksmithing was an obsession for me. So that's essentially why I learned it. I've been approached by a few people asking that same question, like, how did you do this? And how did you get into it so deep and so fast? And blah, blah, blah. As I honestly lived, eat, breathe blacksmithing for, I don't know, 3 years. Every book I read was blacksmithing. Every YouTube video I watched was blacksmithing. I don't watch television. I have a hate relationship for televisions and anything attached to that other than educational content. I absolutely love Discovery Channel. I really
Cool.
wish I could subscribe to just Discovery Channel for my cable broadcasting, but I can't. But yeah, so it was YouTube, a ton of YouTube, a ton of books. I took a course. It was a very simple course I took at a place called Cloverdale Forge. It's with Matt Jenkins. He's a local blacksmith here in Winnipeg. He's a world-renowned blacksmith himself, and I think they're married. His wife Rudy, him and his better half Rudy host courses at their forge out near Selkirk, Manitoba. They normally host about, I think, 10 different classes a year, but with COVID, they haven't been able to for the last couple of years, unfortunately. So, yeah, that's put a big dent on people getting their
Of
education around
course.
here. But yeah, that's how I learned,
Yeah.
was YouTube, books, and Matt Jenkins.
Nice. Yeah, my dad is similarly obsessed with bow making essentially. So he's always told me now he just tells me he's like, Julie, if you ever want to learn anything, just go to YouTube. Because I was fixing the toilet the other day, and I was like, Dad, what do I do? He's like, go to YouTube. So COVID, thankfully, we have YouTube that we can learn on during COVID. It's awesome. Um, But like, what are the costs? When you're first starting out, is it super expensive?
Oh, geez, that really depends how you want to go about it. I had a discussion with a gentleman actually just the other day about that. He said, how can I do this? What's the cheapest way I can get into blacksmithing? The cheapest way you can go into blacksmithing is go dig a hole in your backyard, dig a trench to that hole, put a metal pipe down in that hole, or in that trench, sorry, bury the pipe. Well, you don't even have to bury the pipe, honestly. Put a pipe down there, hook up that pipe to your blow dryer, go buy a bag of charcoal from the Canadian Tire or local hardware store, start a fire in that hole with the charcoal, and you've got yourself a forge. It's powered by your blow dryer. That will get hot enough to melt steel, literally melt steel. If you're not careful and you put a piece of steel in there and you're not watching it, you'll go to pull it out, and the end of the piece of steel that was in the fire will be missing.
Whoa.
Yeah, you can watch how that happens. As it happens, you can pull your steel out and inspect it as it's heating up, and as it's reaching that melting point, it'll start to sparkle. That's how, as a blacksmith, your steel is at the right temperature to get a proper forge weld, is once it's reached that sparkling temperature. There's ways to go beyond that. You don't have to bring it up to the sparkling temperature to achieve a forge weld, but yeah, that's essentially telling you that your metal is at that melting point. So, I mean, you start off with that for your forge. Everyone's got rail yards, rail tracks lying around everywhere. All you need is a small piece of railroad track, say a foot long. Don't steal one.
Yeah, please don't.
Because and the reason I say that, you talk to one of the guys that work at the rail yards, you might not find it on the first guy, but ask around, man. Somebody will literally give you a piece, or it might cost you $20. There's so many blacksmith guys around that have railroad track lying around in their shop, because it is actually a good steel to use for tools and stuff like that as well. So you start off with you got your free forge in the ground. Well, what did it cost you? $15 for a bag of charcoal, and you maybe had to go to the thrift store and buy yourself a blow dryer for $5. So you're in $20 now for digging yourself a little forge. You get your $20 railroad track for anvil, and then you stop at your local Princess Auto and you buy yourself a hammer for $10. And oh, by the way, railroad spikes. Everyone loves to play with railroad spikes, and you talk to the same guy that gave you the railroad track, he'll probably give you a couple railroad spikes to start off with. You can start off with a pair of pliers. You don't need a pair of tongs. Princess Auto actually just had a deal on. You could get a really janky pair of tongs through them for $7, I think it was. So, I mean, yeah, $50, and yeah, start playing with metal and see where it goes there, see if you like it. You want to step up your game beyond that and get yourself a actual forge. You can start searching around on Marketplace. You'll find a forge, like like an outdoor coal forge. You can find one of those with a hand crank on it, usually about $200-$400 in that range for a hand cranked forge. You can go to Princess Auto. You can buy a propane forge from Princess Auto now, that's made by my buddy Mighty Forge. He's out of British Columbia, so they're locally supported Canadian company. I highly recommend them. They build awesome forges, and they're selling out of Princess Auto. They've got two different models. They've got a single burner and a 3-burner, I think.
Just for my American listeners, can they get that? Or is it only at, because I think Princess Auto is only Canadian, right?
Princess Auto is only Canadian. You can order, to the States from Princess Auto, but Princess Auto has its equivalent in the United States, well known as its equivalent is Harbor Freight.
Oh, okay.
Now,
Great.
I've never personally visited a Harbor Freight, so I don't know what they carry as far as forges, but I know there's a ton of companies out there building forges. Couple of names I could rattle off is Devil's Forge is one of them. Yeah, well, that's the one that comes to mind for sure. In Canada, I know there's Mighty Forge. There's Sean Cunningham out of Front Step Forge in Edmonton. He builds forges as well. There's those two those two companies that I highly recommend. And for those you're looking upwards of $500, between $5 to $1,000 for a good propane forge. There are companies, I think Devil Forge is one of them actually, that sells it for quite a bit cheaper. But then you're getting into a quality issue, and I think you're best off to be looking at, if you're gonna get into it seriously, and when you're buying a propane forge, you are getting into it seriously, spend the $500 plus at least, I would say.
Okay,
Um,
so essentially, a beginner can start, like you said, DIY, under $100, start to play a little bit, learn how to bend metal, maybe, just the very basics. And then they can up their budget and go, spend a couple thousand and get like a decent setup and start doing it out of their. Can you do it in a closed garage or you have to leave the door open? How does that work?
well, so I don't really recommend doing a coal forge indoors. There's a bit of a fire hazard to that, unless you have the proper setup for it with the hood and the exhaust and whatnot. So don't go running a coal forge in your garage thinking that an open door is going to be good enough. I really don't think that that's a good idea. There is quite a bit of smoke that comes from a coal forge. Um, a charcoal forge can throw a lot of sparks at times. So again, not smart to run charcoal. And there, I don't know if you know that the difference between coal and charcoal. Charcoal is can be a man-made product, easily made by man. You can do it in your backyard by burning wood in a barrel and creating an oxygen-free environment for the wood to burn in, and you'll create charcoal. Coal is something you have to dig out of the ground, and there are various grades of coal as well. So depending on the grade of coal, it's going to affect how that coal burns. And there's different fire management you have to do with coal as well to ensure that it burns properly. So I so highly recommend going to propane and just forgetting about all of that. But at the same time, there's things with propane that you're losing out on with coal as well. The coal is going to achieve a much higher temperature, much easier than propane will. But I run my propane forge here in the shop. You might see it here in the background. It was something that I made myself. That's my
Okay,
forge
yeah,
there. It looks like a box on a pipe, right? Like,
it does.
yeah, with some hoses going into it. That's essentially, it's a brick forge. I went to a local construction company, bought a bunch of Firebrick that's rated for 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit, I believe. Um, Built a square structure with those fire bricks and plumbed in a burner into the top of it. And then I came up with this janky idea of adding a blower to that, which is not the normal way of setting up a propane forge. Normally they are ran either, it's a similar setup with this, with the propane blowing straight into the blower, or there's a Venturi setup. Well, I had the Venturi set up and it wasn't working, so I added a blower, and that just kind of created a magical situation for me that I haven't turned back from since. I learned
Wow.
all of that on YouTube. Again, YouTube. Yeah,
I was just about to ask. I
yeah.
was I was like, that seems like really, really handy. And also today I learned there's such a thing as fire bricks. I had no idea that was a thing.
And there's
So,
different grades of fire brick too.
geez, it's
Most people go to the Canadian Tire, or Ukrainian Tire as we like to call it, and pick themselves up a couple fire bricks from the Ukrainian Tire and throw together themselves a forge. And after the first couple burns, they find that their bricks are melting and it looks like freaking green glass on the inside of their on the inside of their forge. And it's like, what the heck? Well, those fire bricks are only meant to go to a certain temperature. So when you're buying fire bricks, make sure you're buying the right type of fire bricks. And as well, there's a different harnesses of fire bricks that you can get that affect their insulation values as well, which is something that you have to have a good understanding of when it comes to building your forge, because some people think that oh, well, this is the brick that was available, it'll work for me. Well, I'm sorry, this hard brick that you picked up is not meant to retain heat. It's an insulating brick, but it's going to take forever for it to get up to temperature, and it's also going to eat a lot of fuel in order to keep a temperature. Whereas if you go with the proper brick, which is a very soft brick, it heats up very easily, and it also retains its heat very well. So there's
interesting. So you're almost like a blacksmith is also not just a master of metal, but a master of heat, because, like you said, there's different elements of fuel, coal, charcoal, propane, things like that.
The blacksmith was originally known as a wizard at the dawn of the ages for a reason. What we did was considered magic, being able to pull metal out of sand, essentially, because creating a bloomery, creating your own metal, and then being able to shape it in fire, being able to take two pieces of metal and form them together.
It's mind-blowing. It really is.
Wizardry.
Yeah, exactly. I'm curious to know what kinds of metals you work with, because since I've joined that Facebook group, I've seen, especially knives, like knives of different metals. I've seen like a lot of damascus, I think it's called, which has a really, really cool pattern. I'll ask my audience to just go ahead and Google Damascus blades or something, and you'll see there's this beautiful kind of aesthetic to them. But like, what kind of metals do you usually work with?
Well, being what I do in the shop is mostly artistic work. I am mostly mild steel. I do work with a bit of stainless. I work with a lot of copper, brass as well, aluminum. I do actually play a lot with tool steel when it comes to making my own tools, because a lot of the tools I have require a certain level of hardness to them, and you're not going to get that hardness out of your steel using mild steel. There's special steels that you have to get into playing with, and every type of tool still has its own unique properties to it that you have to really understand what it is you're doing with those specific steels in order to get the proper results you're going for, right? A prime example I can use for that is making hammers. There's two prime tools you need for making a hammer. One, which is your hammer eye punch, and the next tool being your hammer eye drift. Both I highly recommend making out of H13, because you're going to be doing a lot of hot work with those tools. The hammer eye punch is used to punch out that center hole on your hammer, is that where the handle goes. You'll take a solid piece of steel and start punching a hammer. It looks like a hammer. Remember I was telling you about the top tools? Well, the hammer I punch is a top tool. It looks like a hammer, but it kind of has like a weird point to it. I'd show you, but there's not really any point for the audience here. But
Yeah.
do you get the gist? It's kind of like a hammer
Yeah.
with a point on the end of it, and you drive that pointed end into the center of the hammer from flipping it from both sides or whatever. And eventually that tool is in that steel for quite a while as you're trying to hammer out that piece of steel. It starts squishing the steel together, and that point where you're consistently hammering in that exact same spot, it'll take that steel and start to squish it down and create a hole in the middle of that chunk of steel you have. And you do it from both sides so that you create an equal size hole. And eventually you get to a point where you actually punch out that squished piece of steel that's left in there. What's barely left of that squished piece of steel punches out and leaves you with a clean hole. Well, all that hot work on that piece of steel, if it was mild steel, you would have a deformed piece of Play-Doh left in your hand. It would be nothing because it could not handle that heat. H13 is a steel specifically designed for hot working. It can get up to a glowing red temperature and still have a very hard time losing its dimensional shape to it, which for a blacksmith making your own tools, you couldn't ask for anything better. You're always working with red hot steel. It's, you want something that's holding its shape, right? But then there's the knife guys, and they want to worry about something that has what's called edge retention to it. And when you start getting into edge retention, something like H13 is not going to have it. You want to start getting into your higher carbon steels, or you want to get into your alloy steels where you start adding in different alloys into the steel, like vanadium and chromium, stuff like that. I actually just took some steel in that I had for what's called spectroscopy. I think I'm saying that wrong. It was an X-ray analysis, essentially.
Oh, yeah.
And I got the X-ray analysis I got back was a little bit mind-boggling, because it said that there was 0.31% iridium in the steel, which iridium is a very, very rare steel, very expensive steel as well. And given the part that I know that that steel comes from, I was very, very mind boggled that that was in there. But then going into further research on that, talking to other people that have background in X-ray, they said that because it's an X-ray, the X-ray doesn't actually pick up the carbon content in the steel, and because of that, it may have had a misreading, and that's why it picked the iridium up instead. So I'm a little lost on where I'm at with that steel, but that's kind of a breakdown of the different types of steel you can be playing with. It's
It,
all over the place.
I'm curious to know, do you sometimes work with reclaimed steel? So, like, things
Oh
like,
yeah.
if I had like a table made out of steel or whatever, could I then melt it down and create something else with it? Like, is that even possible?
Well, you wouldn't melt it down per se because I mean that's there's not many guys in the blacksmithing world that are really making their own steel. The steel is so readily available, sorry, that you just go buy your own. If you are making steel, then you're doing what's called most likely what you're doing is called a Wootz. What's the word for it now? Bloomery, a Wootz Bloomery, which
Okay.
is something that a lot of blacksmiths have some interest in nowadays because that's tracing back to the origins of Damascus, which comes from Syria, and the real Damascus is completely different than today's day and age Damascus. Today's day and age Damascus is actually scientifically more or less referred to as pattern welded steel because it does not even come close to the real world Damascus. The real world Damascus
Yeah.
nowadays and being pattern welded because the Damascus steel that came from Syria was essentially due to the content of steel that they had available to them there. They um, kind of stumbled upon it accidentally, essentially, is what it was. And then there's a bit of a history to that too, because the Vikings ended up picking up on that. And there's like, how the heck did the Vikings get this being way up where they were from Syria? But there happened to be some trade route stuff that is coming into light nowadays that shows how all that worked out. But today's day and age Damascus is pattern welded steel, and what it is you essentially are taking a high nickel steel and a high carbon steel and putting them together in layers, forge welding them at, remember how I was telling you the forge welding temperatures?
Yeah.
So you're taking those different pieces of steel, throwing them into a fire and bringing them up to that forge welding temperature and essentially gluing them together. They glue themselves together. It's the iron molecules, once they reach that temperature, attract each other, right? And when you hammer them together, then they become one. And now you're left with two different types of steel in one. And when you do an acid etch, those two different types of steel show an extreme difference because one has a metal in it that is very resistant to acid etching, and the other one has a metal in it that is very susceptible to acid etching. So you do that, and it pops out the pattern on you, and you're left with what's now known today as Damascus steel.
That's what that is. I was wondering what was causing all those patterns, and then I saw somebody in the Facebook group say, "Oh, this knife is ready for its acid or acid bath," and I
Yep.
was like, "Oh, wait a minute! So it's the acid that actually reveals the pattern." So when you guys are actually doing this process, you have no idea what it's going to look like until you do the acid wash,
Well,
or do you? You kind of have you kind of know.
you pretty much know because there's different formulas to creating different patterns. You
Oh,
generally, when you first get into it, you kind of go into it going like, I don't know what I'm going to do and it's going to come out. But eventually you get to a point where you know exactly what you're going to get out. And then eventually you get to a point where you're playing with those patterns to create exactly what you want. And then you get to a point where you're a master of those patterns and you're doing stuff like well-known knife maker Mareko Mamausi does. And he puts out patterns that are just freaking mind-boggling, man. Oh,
really?
yeah. You start playing with stuff. You can get powdered steel. So you start playing with powdered steel and you can put it into a canister. If you've ever watched Forged in Fire, you'll see they do it. It's a process they've done on Forged in Fire a few times. They're canister Damascus. So you take, ball bearings or whatever, and you throw it into a powder, throw it in the tube, weld up the tube and then bring up the tube to forge welding temperatures, squish everything together so that everything inside the tube forge welds, and the powder versus whatever other metal you put inside of there will react with each other to give you that different pattern, right? So you do that, and you can do purposeful patterns like creating flags, creating stars, you name it, man. There's some guys out there that are creating patterns that, I don't know, man. Makes
Yeah, they have a lot of time on their hands to make that. That's for sure.
oh,
um, I have to ask you because I'd be remiss in not asking you because you're a blacksmith. Have you ever made a sword? And if so, why not? Or if not, why not?
um well, okay. Yes, I've made a sword. It was way before I was ever a blacksmith. I think I was maybe 14 years old, and me and my friends were goofing around like we did back in the day, because I grew up in a small town with nothing better to do, played around in the bush all the time, and yeah.
Yeah,
But
of course.
as a blacksmith, no. And to be honest, I'm really not even a knife guy. I've made maybe a handful of knives since I started blacksmithing, and the one knife that I've been making that's like a real knife, not like I've made railroad spike knives. I don't call them real knives because they're not real knives. I'm gonna get out. What do you call that? They were just talking about this on one of the other podcasts I listened to, where you say something just to rile people up. Yeah, spike.
Yeah, you're trolling. You're
Yes.
trolling is what you're doing. I'm sure we'll get comments on this when I post it in the blacksmith group. But no, I mean, I guess the reason I'm asking again is because I play so many video games. You associate a blacksmith to a knife maker or a sword maker, but like you said, you're an artistic guy. You make really cool. I saw you make that Superman poker that you did for somebody. That was really really neat.
Thanks.
So I still maintain that one of my dreams is to get a blacksmith to make me a Conan sword, Conan the Barbarian.
Oh,
So that's like
I mean,
one of my dreams.
I have dreams and aspirations to one day make a sword myself as well.
Mhm.
The skill level is not even close to being there yet. Um, I
So it
don't,
takes a while, eh?
as far as I'm concerned, well, it would help if I was making knives, and I'd be building my skills towards making a sword,
Right.
right? I think that's one of the issues is I'm not even focusing on that side of blacksmithing, and because of that, I'm not building those skills. Whereas if I
Right.
was, then that day would be coming sooner. But I have my aspirations to be building stuff more like I want to. I'd like to see my artwork on buildings, stuff like
Like
that, right?
artistic door handles kind of things.
Yeah, artistic railings or on
Railings.
balconies, stuff like that, or maybe a statue somewhere eventually one day, something that's gonna be there for a long, long time, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, there is something that's telling me I should be making knives too, because knives are one of those things that people get as heirloom items, and they pass them down throughout the family for the rest of their lives. So your name would be around for the rest of that as well. There's a thing that I heard actually the other day, that someone dies twice in this world, right? You die when you die, but then you die again when someone says your name for the last time.
Mm.
And it got me thinking that I want my name to be said for a long time. I don't know why, but I kind of want it to be out there.
That's really that wow, you're gonna definitely make me think after this recording. But no, it's true. I mean, and yet it's interesting because my dad passed me down the knife that him and his him and his dad, so my grandfather used to skin, their first moose.
Nice.
So I have like the family knife, but there's no name. I don't know who made it. So, that's interesting too, is that you would really have to put your signature on it, obviously. But even with something like a door handle, I can think of, door handles, especially in Europe. They're all like
Right.
carved and they're beautiful, and like the big wrought iron kind of doors that you grab, and the door knockers, the
Mm-hmm.
beautiful iron or whatever they're made out of door knockers are heavy, you know?
Yeah.
Those are the things that, yeah, those are the kind of things that do last. I'm curious, we have about 15 minutes left. I'm curious to know, how are things going in Canada? Because the discussion was really interesting when I posted in there. People really felt like Canadians don't value handmade stuff made in Canada.
Oh man, that
It's a
is
heavy topic.
yeah, that is. It's such an interesting thing that I've been watching my whole life growing up because I've traveled a lot of Canada, and I've always been my eyes always been open to the art side of things. Ever since I was a little kid, seeing different blacksmith shops or artisan shops on my travels to British Columbia and as well to the East Coast. And it always blew me away that these guys aren't doing better. I never, and it was something that my father-in-law sat me aside about with, it was about 20 years ago, and sat me down and said, "Are you sure you want to do this? There's a reason there's a starving artist, thing out there, right?" And in Canada, it's definitely, there's not a lot of artists out there that are really making it big. There are some guys out there that definitely are, but it's yeah. I see stuff go on Facebook Marketplace, for example, that was obviously a handmade item that if I made it, I'd be charging, a couple $100 for, and this person's selling it for $20 because they don't want it anymore. And in a way,
Oh,
it breaks my heart to see that because I know the work that went into making that, but at the same time, I totally understand. I've got a piece of art that I made. It was back in my college days, and I'm in the middle of cleaning up my house right now because we're moving, and I made the decision that, you know what, I'm going to throw this piece out. I've got 3 others that are very similar to it, and this one just doesn't cut the bill. It's going to the scrapyard. And I think that that's partially one of the unfortunate sides to art is, it's all in the eye of the beholder. To me, that piece was something that was really special when I made it. But then as the years went by, I realized that it's not. And to other people, they may have saw that right away. And then to another person, I might be going to the scrapyard to throw that on. They'll see it and they'll be like, "Holy crap, that's awesome. Let me have that." Sure. So,
yeah, it's really interesting. I lived in Montreal for 3 years, and I saw how people in Montreal and Quebec, they value their artists. Oh my God. Like
yeah.
you can sell so much work in Quebec. They really, have like a Quebec artisan marketplace
Yeah.
in Old Montreal where you can go buy like, I used to always do all my Christmas shopping there. It was all made by Quebec artisans. I bought jewelry, lots of jewelry for friends and stuff and family. And I moved back to Ottawa and I was like, oh man, this doesn't exist here. There's like the Byward Market, but it's not even local people who made the stuff in there. So, there's not a whole lot. And I don't know. I'm going to have to talk to more American artisans, but I'm curious to see if it's the same way there. But I think part of that, correct me if I'm wrong, part of that is that the people who are buying handmade stuff aren't directly connected to artisans, which is why I'm trying to build this marketplace. Because I see my buddies in tech who are full on hipsters who are paying like $3,000 for like a leather pouch, and I'm like, okay, these guys need to be connected to these guys. We got to make the link here because somebody's not talking to somebody here,
Well, yes and no,
they're
because
buyers, right?
yeah, but come on, do us a favor, man. That leather guy that made $3,000 on that poach is stoked.
Yeah, totally. Totally.
Oh man,
Totally.
it's a tough world out there because I see that, and it sucks on another aspect too because you get guys that come into the knife makers and they're like, why the heck is this knife worth $1,000? Like, who the heck do you think you are charging $1,000 for a knife? You have no idea what into
Yeah.
making that knife, and
And
it's a
maybe
constant
that's
battle.
part of the education. You're the president of the Manitoba Blacksmiths Guild, and that's something you were telling me before we started recording. Is that you guys are going to be doing an education campaign? Because I think once people get to see the process, like really, oh, this took 1,000 hours to create. then it kind of ups the value. People realize that, oh yeah, this guy like put his blood, sweat, and tears into this, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Yeah, like with the Manitoba Blacksmith Guild, that's something that we started, what was it, 2 years ago, about 2 years ago. And it freaking COVID put this huge block in our progress, unfortunately. But there was supposed to be something held coming up this summer called Canarn in Fergus, Ontario, which got canceled. Unfortunately, it was supposed to be an in-person event. It's held every 2 years, and myself and my colleague Justin Lamoureux, he's the vice president of the guild. We stepped up to the plate and said, why cancel it? We did a virtual event for our group about a month ago. It was in October that we did it now, but at the time it was a month ago. And we approached the committee and said that we were interested in doing it, and they've kind of handed over the reins to us and said, yeah, let's do it. Let's make a virtual event. So myself and Justin have been banging things out for the last few months, trying to figure things out for getting Canarn rolling out really well. It's all about the education, right? I'm not doing Canarn, or we're not doing Canarn for personal gain. I mean, yeah, what are we going to get from it? Our name's going to get out there. But the real thing about this, the whole reason I'm the president of the Manitoba Blacksmith Guild, is I want to see more people get involved in it, and I want that education to be available to people. It's something there is something here in Manitoba, but there's not enough. And since we started the group, I think we're at like 300 members now online or something like that. We've got
Awesome.
60 paid members in the group, and I honestly feel like we're doing what we can. There's always more you can do, but we're doing what we can with what we've got available to us right now. And Canarn coming forward hopefully is going to open up that window, like you were saying, to even more people Canada wide. It's going to be an interesting event with demonstrators from all over the world. That we've got people from down in the
Nice.
United States right now listed for demonstrations. And we're working on some Canadian guys as well. And I've got my eyes on a gentleman from Sweden, and Justin has his eyes on a gentleman from South Africa. So
Wow.
yeah, we'll see where
That's a
it
really
all
good
pans out.
opportunity.
Yeah,
Awesome.
yeah, and we're
Yeah,
also
well,
doing monthly ones as well with just the group too. So yeah,
cool. Cool. We'll put I'll message you after this recording, but we'll put links at the bottom in the show notes so that people can actually access all these things online. We have a few minutes left. I would love to use that time to talk to you about Lego, because I know that you
I love
are.
Lego.
Yeah, me
Yes,
too. Me too. We have
nice.
to talk about Lego for like
Okay.
we got like 5 minutes, but you've been playing since you were a kid too, huh?
Uh, it's probably one of the first toys I ever remember getting as a kid. I think I got it was a castle kit, or maybe it was I know I got a castle kit and a starship kind of thing or whatever around the same time when I was about 4 years old, and it was a tumbleweed effect from there forward.
And do you still build like kits or?
Oh yeah. I kind of had it put away for a few years because it was just didn't really have the space to do it, and the time didn't really seem to be there either. But like I said, I have a 5-year-old daughter now, and she loves Lego almost more than I do. We told her that we've got to pack away the table for getting our house ready to sell, and that was the one thing where she was like, "No, I play with that every day, though." Yeah,
Nice. Yeah, I wanted to mention it because I got back into Lego, I think at the beginning of the pandemic. I think. I can't remember, but I was like, I was like, why don't I play with Lego? I'm like, I'm 44, but I don't care. Like, so I bought a few Lego kits, and then I went on Kijiji and I bought like old vintage ones that
nice.
this guy was
Yeah.
getting rid of his whole collection. And I
Oh,
was like, all the
sick.
cool like spaceship things that don't
Nice.
exist anymore.
Yeah.
And my girlfriend always laughs because whenever I buy a new kit, I throw out the instructions. I don't want to see them. I actually buy kits for parts so I can make
Yeah.
up new stuff.
Yeah.
Is that how
Totally.
you build too, or do you usually like follow the instructions?
I've always followed the instructions for the initial build it once, and then after I built it once, then it becomes parts for sure.
Yes.
Yeah, and
Yes.
one of my favorite things has always been to try to build like the ultimate piece from
Yeah.
all the Lego that I've got, right? Like the biggest castle I can build. Or at one time I had an entire village, like the wizard shop, the blacksmith shop, the castle, the freaking stables, you named it. I was pretty much trying to create my own little medieval village, and then waged war on it with catapults and yeah, it was good times.
Oh my god. That's the kind of stuff I wanna make. I just, I need more space and I need more bricks, and I actually found a website where you can actually order bricks by the part.
Oh, cool.
So, because I love building things like spaceships and jets. I don't know why, I'm just obsessed. And I was, like, looking for, like, little jet parts that I didn't have, and then I found a website and I'm like, "What the fuck? You could actually order these, like, separately? You know, these little parts?"
Holy shit, you just made me
Y
realize I don't think I swore once just during this
I
entire
know,
interview. What
and
the
I'm the one
hell,
who actually
man?
dropped the F-bomb.
It's yeah,
I felt
man, what
comfortable
the
with you. I
hell?
felt comfortable doing it.
No, for sure, dude, man, what the hell? I can't believe I
I
haven't
know.
sworn once. My daddy mind must be in set right now or something. I don't know, dude. Sorry.
That's
Normally people can't handle the amount of swears that come out of my mouth. I did good.
it's funny because you and I were talking earlier, and most of my podcast recordings and most of my podcast guests are not people who I don't think would swear on air. You know, they tend to work in academic settings or they work in the arts, and they might not have the trucker mouth that I do. But I always have to hold back. And then when we right before we started recording, Lando's like, "What happens if I swear?" And I was like, "Oh, okay. Actually, you know what, dude? We're totally good to go." So no, it's been listen, it's been an absolute pleasure. I'm really
Yeah,
thrilled. I feel lucky that the blacksmith community is so heartwarming and kind and open to sharing both their gripes and their loves. Like I really feel like I got a good
right.
sense for what it's like. I feel like the work that you're doing, you and a colleague developed Smithlist. We'll put the link up for that
Oh, thank you.
because that's a really cool national um, directory of Canadian blacksmiths.
Yeah,
And
if I'm not mistaken, we made the decision not that long ago to open up internationally.
oh, good.
Yeah,
Do
so
it, please.
yeah, I think it is.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think it has been
That's
opened up internationally, so anyone around the world can list their blacksmith shop, their bladesmith shop, supply shop. If you have workshops going on, classes going on, you can list it on the website. There's a map to there so that when you go onto the website, you can see on the map where everything is happening. It's a beautiful shop. My A friend of mine, Lauren Wanamaker, he's the gentleman that was behind creating that website. And wow, it's an amazing. I brought him the idea. 2 days later, he had that website built.
nice.
I couldn't believe.
Beautiful.
Yeah, yeah.
Beautiful. Yeah, so thanks for coming on the show. And like I said, we're going to put all the links so that people can follow you and maybe even buy your work. And we'll be in touch again soon for sure.
Thanks a lot, man. That was so fun. Thank you.
Excellent.